wasn't really sure of your date of birth, so I had to go through the records. I figured it was middle to the end of the month. So I started about the 12th, and you go through and it's by day in whatever book this is, census or birthings or what. And I found your name and then found your date of birth, and so I could fill in the Alma information. And I mean, from that point on, I was just waiting and imagining what it would be like. And then realizing that, oh shit, he's almost 30, he has a family. I figured maybe when you turn 21, you'd want to know who I was. And then that didn't happen. Then I thought, well, maybe when he gets married, he'll want to know. And that didn't happen. And I thought, well, he's probably going to have a baby, and then maybe he'll want to know. And that didn't happen. So then, by the time we'd gotten to you being near 30, I figured it probably wasn't going to happen.
Sue called me and said, and I was here alone, and said, I have something really wonderful to tell you.
Pick up. The second message was from the lady at Alma saying, I have good news.
She said, that she had gotten back from this vacation and that there was a message on her answering machine.
Which was something to the effect of, hi, my name is Rees Shad. I was born in Lenox Hill Hospital in New York City on the 22nd of March, 1964.
And I believe you're my birth mother.
Could you please call me? And I left my number. And I hung up the phone. And as soon as I'd done that, I just started ripping my hair out. I was like, what did you do? You have no idea who you're talking to, what the situation is on the other side of the family, on the phone with her family. Maybe maybe her 16-year-old daughter's going to pick up the phone and be completely freaked out, or check the messages and be freaked out, or maybe her husband never knew about me and maybe he's heavy-handed and he's tonight he's going to be beating the shit out of her. I'm just imagining all these terrible scenarios.
I was like, yeah, get him up here. Let's hug him to pieces, I mean, what's the problem? Let's go.
I went and stood in front of Fred and John, and I said, oh my God. And he said, well, what did you expect? You registered.
You introduced yourself over the phone as Nick's son. And I think I was possibly speechless momentarily, just absorbing that bit of unbelievable information.
Where do you start? That was my feeling,
So I was up on Lama and I got a letter, and the letter said,
my name is Rees Shad, and I am the 30-year-old son of Susan Poling and Nick Dunsmore. I was informed by Northfield Mount Hermon that there was no Nick in the class of 1962, but a James, and that you are his older brother. The school has no information on James, and since he is not registered with any adoption registries, you are my freshest lead.
And I had the absolute and incredible and unique pleasure of writing a letter back.
I remember experiencing it as very miraculous that you would exist and that you were someone who was a part of us, kind of a bonus.
I was just amazed. My heart just didn't know where to go. I mean, this is what I had wanted for 30 years, and here you were, and you were all grown up. And you were so handsome, and it was just amazing.
In June 1994, my adopted father died, and my adopted mom had passed on about 6 years before that. So it basically left my sister Leslie and I.
There's totally nobody else. There are no aunts, there are no uncles, Right. Maybe they're cousins someplace in the world in Utah or whatever, but who knows about them? Never had any contact with them. I mean, this was like giant to me. It was really upsetting to me.
Suddenly my sister was the matriarch of the family, and felt like we were way too young to be on our own. In the week or two after my father's death, there had been an obit in the New York Times that mentioned that I lived in upstate New York in this little town of Argyle. And an old friend, a friend from middle school named Brad Painter, looked me up and expressed his condolences and came up to visit that following weekend, so maybe 2 weeks after my father had died. He'd been adopted, as had his sister and brother. And there were a lot of adoption issues in that household. There was a lot of anger for Brad. It was an issue that came up in our relationship because I was this adopted kid who was completely content with not knowing who my birth parents were.
I mean, you felt really strongly about the fact that these were your parents. You know, and I remember there was somebody at the gunnery who did, because we had to take public speaking, who did a speech on being adopted, and I think, you know, this, I don't remember exactly what the speech was, but it had something to do with maybe not feeling whole or, you know, wanting to search for their parents or whatever, and your reaction to that was a very, you know, very strong that, you know, these are my parents and this is my family, and that you really felt that you had no need to search.
There were certainly curious moments where you go, oh, you know, maybe at the end of a fight with a parent or something, when you know, those moments when we're kids when we think, oh, I'm going to run away to the circus, you know, where I probably was like, you know, I wonder what my birth parents were like, or, you know, I wonder where they are right now. But I come to a point in my life pretty early on that it wasn't that important to me. So with Brad, pretty much he ran away when I think he was 16 years old, found his birth mother, and lived with her for many years. Brad shows up on my doorstep, and he's like, you know, what's going on? How you doing? He told me the whole story of finding his birth family. He's like, you really ought to look them up. And I was like, oh yeah, like if there's a phone book somewhere that says, oh, adopted parents. He goes, actually, there is a registry. And he went online and found Alma, found information about them, an 800 number that he gave me. And he said, you really ought to call them. I think part of me didn't really care to search, and that part that did was quite willing to give it up because it was just too loaded of a question.
And then after your dad died, I remember at that point you feeling like you wanted to look into it more. You know, that both your parents were gone, and so there, you know, there was nothing really holding you back. There was no feeling of like it would somehow be a betrayal or anything like that.
So Brad shows up at the door and he says, contact Alma. You know, you should check these guys. I just give them your information, your birth date, where you were born, any information you know. And I did. And within 48 hours they call me back and they say, we've got a match. This is your mom. She lives on Morningside Drive. I was like, oh, she's still in New York. She's only, you know, a few hours away. And she was like, no, she's in Atlanta, Georgia. My sister had been living in Atlanta for a couple of years. She and her husband were moving into a new home.
And you were coming down anyway to Atlanta to help us move into our house. So, you know, I was excited about that. And then I think it was already like right before you came down where you said, you know, I found out the name of my name and address of my birth mother, and she's on the Morningside Drive, and, you know, where's Morningside Drive and where is in Atlanta? And I was like, well, that's 3 miles from us, 2 miles from us, a mile from where we used to live. And so that, I mean, I gotta say that sort of freaked me out, because I was like, I had just lost, Mom had died, you know, pretty young. Dad had died 2 weeks earlier, and you were my family, and I was like, he's leaving, I've got no family left, he's gonna leave me, he's gonna be with his birth family, and I was like totally devastated.
So I was already going to Atlanta. And here my birth mother had been found in Atlanta. So I'm like, oh my God, well, I'm going down to Atlanta next week, and what should I do? She goes, well, I'll tell you what you need to do. You need to get on the phone right now. You need to call this woman, and you need to demand that she take responsibility for your life. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? I mean, I'm 30 years old. Nobody takes responsibility for my life. I have to take responsibility for my life. Why do you? And she's like, and furthermore, don't talk to any social workers because they'll screw it all up. My wife's a social worker, so I'm kind of like, well, that's not going to happen. She goes, well, just don't tell her a lot. Yeah.
Like there were two brain sides of this. There was the whole personal Leslie side, and then there was the Rees side. And I was like, I don't want Rees to get hurt out of this.
What we would do if, she was a bag lady, or, she was some drug addict who was going to latch on to us and, suck us dry in one way or another.
I got on the phone and I called Sue Polling Smith. And I got a message machine. It was her husband Fred's voice saying, you've reached the Smith residence. Sue and Fred and Casper can't come to the phone right now. Please leave your name and number and we'll call you back, basically.
What if she didn't accept you? That came up actually after, well, I guess when you went and you were going to start contacting her, then that came up, but that wasn't the first reaction that I remember.
So I leave the message that I leave. And I'm ripping my hair out, going, oh my God, what have you done? What kind of a crazy, thoughtless thing have you done today?
And I was like, what if the person just says, get away from me, kid, And I was like, I was afraid that giving them a letter or giving them something would give them an opportunity to run away before they really had even set eyes on you, And I thought if they set eyes on you, it would be harder.
I waited. And it was like watching water boil, You just, no answer could have been fast enough. So I call and I leave a second message. And I say, basically, I realize I may have just thrown a grenade into your household, and I apologize. It wasn't my intent. I wasn't thinking.
And I hope everything's okay. I can't remember what you said, but it was the I mean no harm message.
Please don't hold it against me. Here's my number.
And then there was the I'm in New York message.
Oh, and by the way, I'm going to be in Atlanta next week.
And then there was the I'm leaving New York and coming to Atlanta message. Why in the world would she be coming to Atlanta? I didn't understand.
I'm not sure if I even mentioned why I was going to be down there.
Then there was I'm in Atlanta and I'm at this number message.
And you calling every day with the saga of having tried to contact her and that you were leaving messages and she wasn't getting back to you, and the agony over whether you should keep pursuing it or whether that was her way of saying that she didn't want to connect.
I don't remember much of that week. I didn't remember much of that week while it was happening or a week after it happened. I was completely in outer space.
Then there is I'm in Atlanta and I'm at this number. So there were 7 messages on the machine.
I'd been given by Alma her address, and they gave me 825 Morningside Drive. In fact, her address is 824 across the street, but we didn't know that at the time. My brother-in-law was very excited about all this, and he started going out and doing drive-bys, checking out, is there a car in the driveway? There was a car in the driveway. With the lights on. One night the lights were on. They're home. They're just not returning the phone call. Why aren't they returning the phone call?
And then, going up to their house, and he's like scared about going up to the house and everything. And
I'm just all completely freaking out.
And then there is I just wanted to call one more time because I'm leaving Atlanta and please know I can come to Atlanta at any time.
it was just a giant emotional investment on your side. Well, then the other thing that happened is, of course, we had just had the obit in the paper, and so Adele Block called trying to get Dad's house, and I thought it was your Susan calling, because, she called and she said, I think she must have asked for you, got you on the phone, and you came storming downstairs and you said, "What a bitch!" And I was like, oh shit. He finally connects with his birth mom, and she's like, the bat out of hell, And it wasn't her, it was Adele Block trying to buy the apartment downstairs, our house in 535.
And Fred and I went on vacation and came back to your phone call.
I always wondered how Fred actually, I never heard Fred actually talk about that, but I have the impression of, you're leaving this whole message on there, and Fred goes, it's for you.
He just kind of stood back. And so I called you, and we talked for what, an hour? 2 hours? I don't know. Must have been about an hour. Couldn't have been much more than that, because I knew Fred wanted to go to dinner, and you asked if you could come over that night, and I said no, that we really needed some time. And I was thinking about Fred.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, Susan actually did call, and you spent like 5 hours or something on the phone together. I don't know how long you were on the phone together. And that was great, but I gotta say, I was jealous of Susan, because I was like, she's getting family, and I've lost it, And so it was really painful. It was really painful. And Susan is very nice, and Fred is nice. I love Fred. And, it was just too soon. It was just way too soon for me, It was just really upsetting Pamela is just very, voice of reason in these things. And she was like, he just needs to go there on this, and he'll be back, And she was right about that, That was very upsetting. Because I love you. I value the Susan's role in everything now too, but I don't want to devalue our life, and our family. I don't want it to be like, oh, it's either this or that, I feel like it's all important.
Once you called me, and I started calling around, it was a great big secret. Nobody knew that I'd been pregnant, and nobody knew that I'd given a child up for adoption.
Here was this complete person who was my nephew, and I had no clue as to who you were, what you were like.
I did feel a sense of relief, knowing, feeling secure that you had gone through with, with clarity, without anger.
I remember experiencing it as very miraculous that you would exist and that you were someone who was a part of us, kind of a bonus person, something that was part of a bigger plan than we ever knew.
You're like a godsend to the whole family.
It's like you're the beginning of putting right of all the things that were so wrong for so long.
My mom got very deeply involved because there was an incredible argument over having an abortion or not. And then my parents ended up paying part of the girl's fee, or all of it, I don't know, for her to go away and have the baby. That he was put up for immediate adoption. That's all I knew. And that it come from a fairly short relationship that Nick had. My mom, when she did meet Rees, had closure on a heart circle from the preventing that abortion that you would not believe. Next question.
Often we don't get to see the fruit of the things that we did or the decisions we made. With using our best judgment at the time, trying to make good decisions.
There was a woman at Davison, a wonderful woman, she and I just loved each other, this black woman, and she said, "You gave your baby away? We don't do that, we take the babies in." And she wasn't mad at me. She was just looking at me in, how could you do that?
Yeah.
And when she said it, it was like, yeah, how could I do it? But it was also, short of marrying Nick, there was nothing I could do.
I was too immature. I would never do this now, and I hope you know that. I never would have considered adoption.
Even though there's a part of me that said, this poor kid, it's a good thing he escaped right from the start, because the things that would have been done to him would have been terrible. The emotional stigmas that would have been put on you. And Susan, they would never have forgotten, and they would never let anybody else forget. So it was good that you managed to be out from under that. At the same time, we were deprived of you because they were so screwed up.
So I called you and we talked for what, an hour? 2 hours? I don't know. What I said, I guess, was come for lunch. That seems such a silly license. And I spent the next morning just making sure every book was just right in the bookcase and setting the table and making the best crab louis I knew how to make. And I was just walking. Fred said, "Why don't you sit down? You're going to be exhausted." It's like, I can't sit down. And the doorbell rang, and I opened the door, and there you were. And you looked so much like Nora. People have asked me, "How did you know?" And I said, there was no not knowing. First of all, who would make this up? I mean, for what reason would you just call somebody and make this up? But also, you look like Nora. You look so scared.
The thing that you know, stands out as really, really neat, you know, for me, you know, was at the school bus when you sat down on the steps and the foxes were leaping over each other, and there was that evening light, that red evening light, and you sat down and said, I want to play this song for you, oh man, see, you know, and just start playing the guitar there, man. I was like, God, you know, this is one neat kid.
I remember our meeting in the parking lot, and how we set that up, okay, where we're going to meet, trying to find a place where you could, you know, be able to locate it coming into Holly. And it was just really great to see you guys get out of that car. Just see how much you look like Nick, and, you know, all the pain of that, especially Bob's lived, of me too, of the broken relationship with Nick that we've had, you know, but it hasn't been over the years what we would have loved to have, you know. And the fact that he has felt himself such a failure as a person, that he produced you.
He came in, and we sat down, very civilized, sat in the living room. Fred in his chair, you on the couch, me in my chair, and we kind of made small talk for a little while. You know, you see all these shows on Oprah and everything, and the child and the mother fall into each other's arms weeping, and it was like, I thought about it later, and I thought, well, no, I don't think so. I don't understand that.
Then you guys finally connected, and I remember you telling me about the conversation where you laid out for Susan all the horrible stuff you'd ever done in your life, probably confirming for her, and certainly confirming for Fred, that you really were the nightmare that they were afraid that you would be.
I just remember being so excited and getting there and just being astounded at you. And then just, you know, getting to know Pam and as such a wonderful, beautiful person. And so I knew, because there was a lot of competition for your attention. And, you know, so I was like hanging back because, you know, I mean, you were just my nephew. It wasn't like you were my son. So I kind of hanging back and figured, well, geez, you know, this looks like a very pleasant person here and will be a huge indication of what you Rees are like. And so I started talking with her and realizing what a special person she was. And I thought, okay, we're cool. This is cool, you know. And it was just great. It was just great. And it really did. It renewed some of my faith in God, that he would allow this to all happen?
So I went to get a photo album, and I brought it over to the table. And I remember saying something to you like, this is ridiculous, we're carrying on as if you're some child of a relative that, you know, I'm just being polite to. And I think that's when I started to cry. You know, and I've been crying on and off ever since. The other amazing thing that stands out in my mind is you at some point said, do you want to see your grandchildren? It's just such a strange transition from hiding to coming out. And to come out 30 years later is very strange because there isn't, very few people point a finger at you the way they would have 30 years ago. Linda DeTora was at BU. Linda DeTora, my friend. She was a very mothering person, and so there were lots of underclassmen that she knew, and she knew Sue Shepherd was coming into town. And so she told Sue that I was looking for a roommate, and Sue and I hooked up. I had not known her in Northfield. I barely knew her. I knew she was going out with Nick, and the only way I knew Nick was that I'd known his older brother.
After trying me out, you know, I get several girls, you know, friends decided that Sue might be a logical candidate. And I was a track meet, you know, it was actually our first date, you know, and she was wearing an orange semi-transparent blouse with a black bra. I had commented on it. Of course, she punches me right in the gut, and I'm buckled over like this, looking up like. And she did it, you know, for her girlfriends, you know. But we worked that out. Hard first date. But she was a folk singer, you know, had a beautiful voice, really good with a guitar. Started sympathizing with, you know, with some of my writing.
And so I kind of knew Nick, kind of. And I knew Sue out of necessity, and we were going to have this apartment, and the apartment was on the 3rd floor of the home of the Salmons.
When we graduated, her cousin was a painter, studying painting at Boston University, and it was an all-Marxist commune. He had the 1st floor, and the Russian lit teacher had the 2nd floor, and the mystic photographer had the 3rd floor, which made for very interesting people.
I think the husband's name was David. He was an artist. I don't know what the wife did. They had two little children, and they probably rented us this apartment for $75 a week or something. It had a bathroom. You came up the steps. It was an attic apartment. It had a bathroom, a little landing, a living room under the eaves, a kitchen under the eaves, and a bedroom under the eaves.
And on the 2nd floor, Russian lit teacher and she and I split the floor. You know, we had a little living room and bedroom. The kitchen was downstairs, a communal eating arrangement thing.
And Sue and I were going to live there, and then she had a falling out or something with Nick.
I had gone down. Norm actually got on, you know, with the Atlantis first, you know, and I went down to see him.
The Atlantis being Woods Hole's ship, right?
Woods Hole's ship. He was working at a beachside resort, and I went down to see him and ended up sleeping on the beach, and they'd bring me food because I wasn't supposed to be there. But then, you know, fell in love with a sail ship just sitting there, you know. And so I took a whole trunk load of Dostoevsky, that's about all I had in it, and a pair of shorts and a shirt, to down and you know, I got on anyway, got on the Atlantis. But then I was in the port, you know, which was frequent and for a week, 2 weeks at a time. I would go up to Boston.
The first weekend I was there, she was there, and then she disappeared. So we had that weekend where it was like this community thing.
Being whatever, spurious and spontaneous and stupid, I suppose, I drove, you know, unannounced to Boston to see Sue Shepherd, expecting her to be there. She had gone back to Rutland, Vermont.
Her mother had MS or something. And there were two things going on with her. She had to take care of her mom, and I think she and Nick were having problems. She moved out. And so I was left up there.
When I arrived, I was exhausted. You know, it was the middle of the night. Sue let me in.
And so then we get to 4th of July weekend, and Nick just arrives. I'm sleeping in the bed. I wake up, look up. Of course, the mattress was on the floor. You had to have a mattress on the floor. And there he is, standing there. I had seen him the weekend Sue was there, one of the first weekends, because I had come up the steps and he was coming out of the bathroom in a multi-striped towel around his waist. It's hard to take. And so there he was coming through, and he wondered if he could stay in the apartment. And we got talking, and he ended up staying in my bed.
The couch had a rib down the center that would have broken your back. You know, it was a place of, you know, the bed was where I had found a place, you know, it was mine.
I don't think we left the bedroom. I mean, it was just very strange.
You know, it was natural. You know, you know, in the early morning, you know, the pigeons would walk the porch crest outside and call, and that was a time, you know, when I made love to Sue Shepherd, you know. And in my half-awake sleep state, you know, we made love at once.
But that was the only time.
That one time.
We didn't know each other?
And then I didn't see her again.
Except just off in the distance.
I hadn't known her from school.
And then he was gone.
She was a friend of Sue's.
I mean, it was just a very beautiful physical thing, but it was, and I guess we thought it was something a little bit more, but today, when you look back, it was a very nice physical thing, as nice as physical things can be the first time. Then he was gone. And I had this job, and I had this friend at my job. We looked kind of alike, and people would get us confused. Then I realized I was pregnant. And I told her. She was the first person I told. And it was awful. I mean, it was just the most frightening thing that could happen. Because you were not supposed to get pregnant. You were not supposed to have physical relationships. I was a minister's daughter. I mean, how could I have done such a terrible thing? And I'd gotten caught at it, So we're at Howard Johnson's and I'm pregnant. And I finished the job at Howard Johnson's. I don't finish German. And we do Labor Day at Longhouse. And Granddaddy keeps trying to talk to me and I can't talk to him. My grandfather, Granddaddy Poling, was an extremely loving person. And he especially doted on me as Clark's daughter. But I think he doted on everyone. He had enormous hands. If you put your hand in his hand and it was like it would just disappear. And he had big crazy eyebrows. And he was just, I just loved him. So to tell him this was like, ugh. So we got home from that weekend and, you know, we had a dinner or something and Mother and I were cleaning up the kitchen and Mother was drinking and I finally had to tell her. And so I told her and her first reaction was to hug me and we cried and we cried. And then I said, whatever we decide to do, I do not want Granddaddy to know. So she said, don't worry, we'll figure it out. We'll get it done. And I got up the next morning and Bruce comes down, all busy. And Mother comes down and says, we're going to go to New York. And we're having lunch with Granddad. And we're going to go meet with Granddad. So, what had happened was she had gone upstairs, she told Bruce, and Bruce said, her grandfather has to know. I think what Bruce had decided was there was no way he was going to deal with this. There was no reason Granddaddy had to know if Mother and Bruce were not the type of people who, number one, couldn't have stood to have their daughter pregnant in the town of Guilford unmarried, who knew they couldn't have me in their house with a baby, who couldn't support me during all this.
And if anybody in Guilford had known, Sue would have been an outcast. And that's another reason for all the secrecy, is my parents were so concerned with social standing. Right after I'd had the abortion, some friends came over, plus the guy who had gotten me pregnant. And Bruce pitched a fit and was screaming at my mother in the kitchen. I was then, at that point, sitting in the dining room right next to the kitchen with my friends. And he's screaming at my mother about how, what the fuck are we running here? Some kind of whorehouse, home for unwed mothers, what's going on here? You know, and he was just...
Mother had no resources. I mean, you know, you hear lots of stories about women my age who went to homes and stuff. Mother didn't have those kind of resources to try to figure that out. And because that couldn't happen, my grandfather had to be called. So we went to New York. And it was really weird because we didn't go to the apartment. Well, grandmother was not to know. So we didn't go to the apartment. We met Granddaddy at Christian Herald. And we sat in the conference room, this long table. Well, Mother had asked me the night before who the father was. And I had told her that the father was Nick. And she said, well, you need to get married. And I said, I can't marry him. We don't love each other. It was one night. Can't marry him. And, of course, Granddaddy had come up. I'd given her Nick's name. And I guess she told Granddaddy. And among the surprises of that day was the fact that once we had spent some time talking in the conference room, we were going to go to the Princeton Club or something and have lunch, and the Dunsmores were joining us.
She came to my parents at 3.5 months pregnant. I was so young I don't even know exactly, you know, but it was at least 3 months pregnant.
You were 20 or
maybe
19?
4 months. Huh?
You were 19 at that point?
You must have been. Yeah, 19. And with a, whatever, I just knew, man, that I wasn't ready. I didn't have the experience with the people. I didn't know myself. The whole thing.
So Granddaddy was pushing, you gotta get married, you gotta get married, at that point. And we met the Dunsmores for lunch. He came in behind his parents, as any kid in that situation would. But he came immediately to me, and he immediately said, "Are you okay?" We had the lunch, and it was decided during the lunch, that you forget all those conversations. I don't know what they were all about.
It got fairly heavy. He was saying blood of my blood and flesh of my flesh. And, I felt this being pushed, really, really hard, man.
During the lunch, it was decided that I would go home with Nick, and he and I would decide if we could get married.
It's always been my nature to react in a completely opposite direction when I'm pushed. I think that was part of it.
So that's when I went to the Dunsmores, and I was there for the weekend. And I wore your grandmother's nightgown, and because I had no clothes except what I had on my back in New York. That was the night we went up on the roof, and then I couldn't get back down, and I had a call from my mother. I almost fell out. We almost solved the problem right there. Of course, we slept in separate rooms. We cuddled a little bit. But I just all the time thought there was just no way. This isn't right.
I was just deeply in love with Sue Shepherd at that point.
And I probably thought that I was really bad, so, and maybe giving you up was a way, for all the reasons I had to give you up, was a way of getting out of the problem. But it also had to do with the fact that Nick didn't love me. I didn't love Nick. And I knew that. And it was a one-night stand. And as the months went by and Granddaddy kept pushing us together, it was obvious we had nothing in common. I was a straight-laced, poorly read kid who had just suffered through Northfield. And I know he suffered through Mount Hermon, but he would talk about philosophy, and I would sit there with my, not understanding what he was talking about. This was not going to work. But Granddaddy kept pushing, and I kept saying no. Nick did not go to school that year. It was decided that whatever happened, he needed to get money because he was going to pay for the delivery of the baby, and I do believe he also paid for the home. I'm not sure.
So it's like the parents took control. I was kind of shuffled off to the side even. I'm kind of like dazed.
I remember going into the home around Christmas, and then we had one of the first things we did that was happening there was we were having a Christmas party, and they invited all the doctors and social workers and stuff that worked with us, and they came to this party, and that's when I met my obstetrician. And it was just very short, and it was if you had to be in a home, it was the best place in the world to be. It was right near the Museum of Modern Art, of the Metropolitan Museum. And so we'd go to the museum, and we'd go to the Guggenheim, and we just went all over the place, all these pregnant girls. And you develop friendships with different ones of them. There were probably 10 or 12 of us. And there was one girl there that she had her baby and moved on, but one girl there who was knitting. Nobody knit for their babies, but she was knitting, and the reason she was knitting is because she was having a biracial child. And she said, nobody's going to adopt my child. So I want to give him or her something. I mean, every woman is terrified, I think, about her first baby, but we couldn't talk about it really. And there was nobody to reassure us. And we went to Lenox Hill, and it was all doctors and student nurses. And since I'm not sure exactly how I got the attention of the obstetrician, but at some point he took me on as his own. There was one time when I was having an internal, and it was a different doctor, and he came in and he brought a lot of students, and he let everybody experience their first internal. Or it felt like that, and halfway through I just was hysterical. And at that point, his name might come to me. That doctor stepped in, and he would have delivered my baby, except he was, my baby knew, except he was off that night. And so one of his residents did. And then there were all these conversations about, are you going to hold your baby or aren't you? You're not really supposed to, you know, this kind of stuff. And went back and forth. And one night I woke up, or I was trying to go to sleep, and I couldn't go to sleep. And I just had the most terrible constipation. Just terrible constipation. And I would go and sit on the bathroom. I'd think, oh God, if labor is anything like this, I'm just not going to be able to do it. It's just awful. And after about 4 hours of this, I went downstairs to the house mother and I said, you know, I need something. I am so constipated. And she said, how far apart? And I thought, what do you mean? And then it occurred to me I had been going back to bed, and then it would start to hurt, and then I'd get up and I'd go to the bathroom. Excuse me, she brought me to the hospital. We walked to the hospital, stopping at every light post because I was having contractions. And that labor was something else because you were so scared, and it wasn't like you had with Olivia and Dylan, because you were totally alone.
Right.
And anyway, I got through the whole thing. There was a woman next door, and she was screaming and crying, and I just wasn't going to do that. And so until the episiotomy, I was very quiet. And at the episiotomy, I screamed, and they called from another operating room to see if things were okay. I think I thought to you a lot during my pregnancy. I don't think I talked to you, but I think I thought to you a lot. And that was pretty special. Especially when you started to move. I remember the first time you moved. I was in a dentist chair, and I felt this funny feeling, and I thought, oh, I'm scared. I must be nervous or something, you know? And then it happened again, just this little flutter. And it was you. It was great. It was really great. But I would think to you, I would try to explain to you what was going on. But then it came, and in those days they kept me in the hospital for a few days. So Corky, who had been wonderful throughout my pregnancy, he couldn't get over the fact that Mother just couldn't deal with the whole thing. And so he was going to Columbia, and he would come every weekend and take me out when I was at my grandparents, and also when I was available and not at Ann's. And then once I was in the home, he would come visit me. He even took me to a party once when I was pregnant. And it was amazing. So I had you, and somebody called him. I don't know, the house mother must have called Mother. I didn't talk to her. Called Ann, and called Corky, or maybe Ann called Corky. And Corky came and visited me. He was the only one that visited me. I had made the decision early on that I would hold you. Yeah, it was my only time. It was going to be my time. You just shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do this. You become attached. I mean, how stupid. You're attached for 9 months. But anyway, so I held you. We would go. It was a room of 6 or 8 women, and they would bring the babies in, and we'd go sit at a table, and we would feed you. I went to the table most of the time, except the last time. Okay, so just the nurse came and she said,
I was just going to ask you for one, that's all.
the nurse came and she said, don't you want to go to the table? And I said, no, this is my last time with him. I'm leaving to go take him up to the adoption agency. And so she closed the curtain. And I fed you your bottle. And I said goodbye to you. So anyway, so we get to the place where I'm in the taxi and I'm holding you, and the house mother takes you away from me. And it was okay. I mean, I didn't make a scene and I didn't cry. But it was like she did it very purposefully. I mean, it would have been probably next to impossible for me to have walked into Spence Chapin and handed you to someone. I trusted her. So we get into Spence Chapin, and there's a lady waiting there, and I guess she's the lady that took care of you for the first few weeks. Although I know you think your mother got you right away, but I don't think so.
Yeah.
And then I went back to the home. Most of the girls went home to their parents or wherever they were. I went back to the home for a week. And during that time, Nick came in. And we spent, I don't know what we did together. We spent some time together, and then he left. And then at probably 6 weeks, I think it was about the time of my 6-week checkup, I was home in Guilford all that time, and at the time of my 6-week checkup, I went back to New York, and I went, and Nick joined me, and I signed the papers.
I also, went to the place where the adoption was to take place before. There was one other meeting, and I'm actually fuzzy as to exactly where it was or what was going on there, except that, she had had the delivery. I guess I was in the hospital for all I know.
Yeah.
And then the, saw an apartment, held her for a long time.
And you were there, and you were in this cute little blue outfit. And they brought you into us, and we both held you. And I think I gave you a bottle, I'm not sure. Then they took you away. And I probably cry more about it today than I did then. Because I had a mission. I mean, I knew what I had to do to get through. And I just did it. So, you begin the period of mourning that lasted until you knocked on the door. I went for 30 years just in my rigid little way, knowing, making myself know I'd done the right thing. Just wishing I had that too. But life went on, you know, and I talked about you a lot. I was told I wasn't supposed to, but I would tell friends about you, close friends. Actually, I told a lot of people about you in the beginning, because it was the only way I could deal with it was to talk about it. And my mother told me you shouldn't talk about it. Just put it away, which of course is what she did. Fred always told me he didn't want to have children. And so, I guess I decided that I wanted Fred more than I wanted to follow that dream. Maybe I thought a little bit that things would change. And then, when I was 35, we got married when I was 30. When I was 35, I had my tubes tied. And as I've lived through and thought a lot about all that went on in those 30 years before our reunion, I realized that I'm sorry, a lot of me just did not think I deserved to have another child. I never, ever thought that until you came. I never made that connection. But just as I went through the pregnancy and the adoption process, with gritted teeth and shutters on, when it came to not having children, any more children, it was like, well, that's the way it's going to be. And this is okay, because I really love Fred. And that will be enough. And when he didn't come around by the time I was 35, I put myself through the pain. And it was just another punishment. I had the tube ligation, and then we went to Florida for spring break. I guess what that meant was, it was kind of a double whammy. You know, like, I don't have you, and I'm not going to have anybody else. I still wasn't understanding the punishment part of it to myself, but I was, you know, that's where my heart was at that point. So we continued on in our marriage, and I think we had a good marriage. We have a good marriage. We have a much better marriage now. You were always in my head.
It was like one of those babushka dolls, right? I think that's what they're called. The Russian dolls, where you take one off and there's another one inside, another one inside, another one inside. And not only was there Susan, but there was Susan's brother and two sisters. There was the Dunsmores. There's three uncles, and my father, too. My father's parents were both alive. And that was just stunning. My children, their grandparents are a very important part of their life, and something that we all cherish very much. And so for me to have found them was, it was one miracle after another. It didn't stop. I was finding cousins. I was meeting people who looked like me. I was meeting people who had my mannerisms. I was meeting people who explained all the things that were different about me in my family. Something that's very difficult to explain for me is how, for me, all my life, my close friends have become family. I've accepted them into my life as brothers and sisters. As my father would say, why do you let these people under your skin so deeply? The answer, of course, was, that's what you did for me.
I have developed a peculiar habit, right?
What's that?
Talking to myself.
Me too.
When I need to clarify what I'm thinking, and this is doing it for me, because, certain things aren't going to slide into other things until you get that momentum. And this is all bullshit back here, but here it is, click. And now I'm on frequency, I've been able to begin to step, to the level where things are clear for me, where I can, smile again. More importantly, make other people smile.
I think it's really quite amazing, given the fact that you grew up across the country with a totally different family and a different background in many ways, from our own, but we have found such commonality.
I know I would give Pat a big hug and just tell her thank you so much. Because you've made this boy able to love with all the love you've given him. And you've nurtured his sensitivity. And thank you for that.
Well, I think there's been a meeting of minds and a meeting of hearts that is very precious to me, very precious to us, and not something that is found so very often in life and in relationships, and especially in an uncovered relationship such as this one.
So anyway, this kid came along, Rees, and it's a real fine show. I kid you not.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's cool.
My mother met a man of the ocean, a sailor of jungles and mountains and seas. They shared each other while doves cooed and nested. Outside a window, that's how I came to be. His life lay before him, a maze of dark questions. It took him away like the tide of that sea. A child of a minister's son, she stood silent, not willing or able to sail on that sea. All the stars shine on, though their far may be long gone. The passion of an instant leaves so much to gaze upon. After love's sweet song's been sung. child, a bastard, I was given to others. No easy decision, my new life was laid. And as years passed, as I grew to father my own child, my mind wandered back to how I had been made. For the stars shine